young adults who got really bad parenting, and it has caused a lot of different issues for them. For some clients, it was maybe physical trauma or neglect.
Yeah.
One client in particular I'm thinking of grew up in a foster home, in the foster system, which was really traumatic for her.
Sure.
So it's kind of developed that I realized I go back with these clients and say, let's rewrite your narrative.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another segment of Conversations with Carmen. I am elated to be joined by another one of my fellow colleagues, Candace Colliflower, licensed marriage and family therapist. I have been looking forward to your interview. We had a great pre-interview conversation, and you shared some really wonderful things with me about life and about your professional and personal journey. So I've really been looking forward to our conversation.
Me
Welcome
as well.
aboard.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, we're going to dive right in.
Okay.
So you shared with me that you are originally from Western Pennsylvania, specifically Butler, Pennsylvania.
Right.
So geographically speaking, for those of our audience viewers who know Pennsylvania and that part of the country, where is that? Is that like a remote area?
Yeah, Butler is a fairly rural area in western Pennsylvania, and it's about 45 minutes north of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So a lot of farming, hunting, and originally when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, it was one of the steel towns. Armco Steel was the main employer of Butler, as well as Pullman Standard. The railroad cars were made there too.
What?
So when the steel industry went bust, Butler kind of went bust too.
Okay.
So during the time I was there, it was a pretty depressed place with a lot of unemployment, and that's why I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you, what was life like for you growing up?
Right. I grew up in the country.
Okay.
My father was a woodworker,
Okay.
and my mother was an executive secretary.
Right.
So they were both working outside the home, but we did live out in the country, and there were only about 3 houses on the road I was on.
Wow.
So that the good part of that was I really developed a love of nature, which I still love.
That's great.
To be outside.
Yeah.
And right, but it also got pretty boring too.
I remember you shared that with me. Only so much.
Yes, exactly.
And I can't remember what we talked about. Did we talk about siblings? Do you have siblings?
I have one older brother.
Okay, yeah.
We're 17 months apart.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's older, and we were really close when we were young because we were about the only ones for each other to play with out there.
Oh,
So we made up a lot of fun games for ourselves, and it was it really developed our creativity. And he's still an artist as well as a psychiatric nurse.
Very nice.
Right.
Is he in California?
He actually moved to Florida.
Okay. Wow.
Which he prefers that
All
to
right.
California, I
Okay.
guess.
To each his own, for sure. Did Butler ever bounce back? Did they ever?
It was really interesting. I just spoke with someone about a month ago who has had business trips back to Pittsburgh, and he goes, "Wow, it's a great city." And I was like, "Do tell."
Really?
Right.
Yeah.
And he said it has really bounced back with the medical field and with a lot of computer and high tech because Carnegie Mellon University is in Pittsburgh, and there are a lot of hospitals. And
Nice.
So I guess it has bounced back a little better.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, but the weather is still the same.
What's the weather like?
The weather is pretty crappy. That's that's the main thing I wanted to move away from. Lousy winters and scraping ice off your windshield and the summers are kind of hot and sticky. That's why I knew I wanted to come to California for the weather.
Yeah, those extremities, man, I tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. Well, and I remember when we were talking about growing up in Pennsylvania, you did mention that, going to college, the idea of you and your brother going to college and pursuing higher education, that was a topic of conversation, between you and your parents. And it sounds like they really planted that seed early
Right,
on. So I'd love
right.
to hear more about that.
Right. Yeah. So my brother and I are the first ones to attend college
Okay.
from our families,
Mhm.
both my mother and father's
Wow.
families.
Wow.
So, right, my mother's family worked in the steel industry, and actually, the generation before came for the coal mining. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So they did not have any further education or higher
Mm.
education.
Mhm.
And the same with my father's family, too.
Okay.
So, that's when my brother and I always knew, though, that we were expected to go on
Yeah.
and looked forward to that,
I
too.
was going to ask you, did you look forward to it?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounded. Yeah, so they planted the seed. Your parents planted the seed, but then your interest grew. Sounds like grew over time. Your brother's interest
Right.
grew over time. So
Right.
that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you did a couple of things professionally speaking before you eventually pivoted to mental health.
Yes.
But I wonder, did your parents have influence over where you started? Because I know you started like in sales and you did HR at some point, and I'd love to hear more about that. But
Right.
were they instrumental in?
That's one thing I've reflected on a
Yeah.
lot, and it's they weren't able to give us really the guidance
Yeah.
as to choosing a college or, what to study, right? So because they had had no experience with that,
Okay.
so that's one thing that I feel like if I had had some guidance, I may have made some other choices or decisions.
Okay.
But I went to the little liberal arts college that was only half-hour away from my home in Butler in Grove City. My brother went a little farther away to Erie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
To Edinburgh University.
Wow.
But and so neither one of us had a lot of experience or had a network after
Yeah.
college to really look for
Okay.
a career.
Yeah. So you just.
So that's how I ended up in sales.
Yep. Well, you know what? The journey has to start somewhere.
That's
for
right,
sure.
right. Uh-huh.
And I know that your bachelor's degree is in English Communication Arts, right?
Yes.
Okay. What did that entail, and what did you originally plan to do with that degree?
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things I, want to, instead of saying, oh, I want to grow up and be a ballerina, I wanted to grow up and be a weatherman on TV.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
I love
How
studying, the weather and looking at the anchormen on TV. So when I chose communication arts, that's kind of what my thoughts were.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying. I did get the degree, but
Right.
had no, no knowledge of how to break into that broadcasting field. So,
Okay. Oh yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So the resourcing and the networking, and those were
Exactly.
probably the factors that were missing from that
Ex-
puzzle. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
I hear
right.
you.
And so, I wanted to live on my own. I moved to Pittsburgh with my best friend at the time, and we lived there, and I had to pay rent the next month, so I found a job in sales.
Yeah. No.
And I do realize how valuable that background in sales has
Right.
been, though. I got a lot of public speaking experience.
Wonderful.
And, there are a lot of psychological strategies that you use with
absolutely.
sales, too.
For
So
sure.
I feel like that's always helped me
Absolutely.
throughout my career.
For sure.
Yeah.
Intuition, the ability to
Yeah.
read people, read
Yes.
body language.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
can imagine that.
And how to get to kind of a win-win
For sure. A
situation.
mutuality. How do I meet this
Yes.
person in the middle? And absolutely, you're right. There is a psychology to that. Now
Yeah.
that I think about it. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's great. You also did some teaching.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What can you share with us about that?
Well, that was kind of the backup plan to the weatherman. Was I thought, well, okay, I can get my teaching degree, and I was planning to teach high school theater arts, or not art, sorry,
Yeah.
theater arts, performing Shakespeare, English, all of that.
Wow.
But when I did my student teaching experience, I hated it.
Did you? What did you hate about it? What did you?
I'll never forget one of the first times I led the class that I had prepared this whole, class, and I expected everyone to be so excited and
Oh.
curious, right? And I stood up in front of the class, and I got through all my information in about 20 minutes. So then I
Okay.
was scared about, all right, what do I do for the rest of the time?
Right.
So I don't remember how I handled that at that
Yeah.
point, but I remember that was my first experience. But I think I was very disappointed because I was always a very eager student. I'm really curious and I
Yeah.
wanted to learn.
Sure.
And I was under the impression that everyone was like that. So
Yeah.
when I was trying to teach Shakespeare to high school seniors and juniors, and saw that most of them were even sleeping, that was
Oh,
kind of a
I
disappointment.
was gonna. Yeah.
And so
Oh,
that's when I realized, maybe teaching isn't really
my thing.
my thing.
Was it disappointing, or was it disappointing and maybe did it plant seeds of like self-doubt, or was it just disappointing and you were still confident but just knew like maybe this isn't my niche, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Okay.
If anything, it was like I realized I wanted to be with kind of like-minded people
Sure.
who
Yeah.
were also curious
Absolutely.
and wanted to learn about themselves
Yeah.
and the world
For
too.
sure.
So
But you may not have gotten there had you not had that experience. You see, everything links together. That's why the journey
exactly,
is so darn important.
exactly.
And hopefully we don't take any juncture for granted. It may seem, because I think a lot of us go through this. I don't know, we go to that place in our heads, well, God, that was, 6 months of my life that I'll never get back, or whatever the case may be. But it's like, well, no, if you flip that on the side, everything's purposeful. So those 6
Exactly.
months that were grueling and that you were grinding and, resulted in you not necessarily doing the thing that you thought you'd do long term, it doesn't mean that it was all for nothing. It was all beneficial, purposeful.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and as I've grown older, I realized that all the experiences I've had with my different jobs have really helped me as a person and helped me in
Absolutely.
the job now. Because, I guess the teaching part came in as I was even in sales. I worked for 3 different companies, and with each of them, eventually I got into training. So I guess that's where I found the teaching
There you
part
go.
was through training that
Absolutely.
way.
You were still able to capture it, just in a different context.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love
right.
that. Wonderful. So you did sort of drop hints a little bit about your relocation to Pittsburgh and then delving into sales. So how did all of that come about?
Okay. And how did I get to California too?
Exactly. That's coming
Right.
up for
Because
sure.
in my mind, it's like, well, Pittsburgh's nice, but it still has the same weather.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I got a promotion from my first sales job with Bell and Howell. I was recruiting for the DeVry Institutes of
Right.
Technology.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they had a school. The nearest school location was in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
So I
Yep.
got promoted to work in that area.
Right.
In Columbus. I was there for a year and realized that was worse than Pittsburgh.
Oh, my.
So sorry to the people in Ohio, but I realized that was not where I wanted to be either. So with
Yep.
the next company I worked with, then I moved to Chicago
Right.
because they had a bigger school in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Okay.
did like Chicago, although that weather was also bad.
Pretty brutal, pretty
Right.
extreme as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when I was working for a legal publishing company, I asked if I could get transferred to Los Angeles.
Okay.
And they agreed.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
that's how I made it out here, and I've
Okay.
never regretted
You've
it.
never regretted it. Had you visited California, or was it just, did you make that request based on hearsay? Why were you so excited?
When I moved to Chicago, that was the first time then that I came to visit California.
Okay.
Right. I
All
guess
right.
in general, I just knew I wanted somewhere with better weather. And then I visited California and realized I love being by the ocean. So that
Okay.
was the draw.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I was going to ask you, was it Southern California? Was it Northern when you had visited initially?
It was Southern California.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
And I guess since I was a little more familiar and the weather was perfect
Right.
at that time,
Right.
30 years ago.
Right.
I wanted to move to Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then fast forward to, and I'm trying to get the timeline right or correct here, so definitely correct me. Master's program first, or working in sales and then met your husband, working for him for
I know,
back
there's
and
a
forth.
lot.
Yeah,
There's a lot.
yep. You have a really great
So,
history.
yeah. Well, when I was in Chicago, that's when I really became interested in psychology,
Okay.
and you know, did a lot of reading and study, and really wanted to pursue a master's in psychology then. But in Chicago, all of the programs were full-time
Right.
day programs.
Yep.
Yeah. And for me, I still needed to support myself.
Sure.
So you know, at that point, I didn't know how it would happen, but I knew that it wasn't going to happen in Chicago. So
Right.
when I moved to California, I discovered that Pepperdine University had a part-time evening program
Yeah.
to get your master's
While you work.
while you work. And so that's what I did. And I had gotten my first master's degree, and at that time planned to go into research. I thought I did not want to do counseling
Right.
or therapy. I'm like, no, I'm not interested in that.
Okay.
Right? I wanted to do research.
Yeah.
And so I got the first master's with the intention to go on to a PhD program.
Okay.
Okay. And then in that time period, after I got my first master's, that's when I met my future husband.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
And so then we had been together. I think that I was pregnant when I realized it's like I don't really want to spend however many more years getting a PhD. And I didn't think it would benefit me, be worth the cost, you know, and the sacrifice of time.
Right.
So that's when I decided to go back to Pepperdine and complete a second master's in counseling psychology.
Okay.
Right.
Wonderful.
So at that point, I
Yeah.
was married and had one child.
One child. Studying in class and then assisting your husband. You worked alongside him, right?
Right.
Okay.
So he owned a business, a golf management business.
Okay.
So I did human resources and payroll for his
Wow.
company. Got out of sales
Okay.
totally.
Okay.
Yeah. So worked for him, raised a couple babies, and again was studying to get before you can get licensed in California. You have to get 3,000 face-to-face hours. So it took me 6 years to get those 3,000 hours.
Well, you know, you do what you got to do, right?
Exactly, and that's how I ran my personal and career life together.
Okay. And was it challenging? I feel like that's a no-brainer, but was it challenging? And if so, what was more challenging about it, and how did you attempt to strike a balance?
Right, right. You know, looking back and reflecting, I'm so glad that I had the luxury, I guess, of being able to just work part-time and raise my kids, because looking back, that is such a special time that I was there for both of them
That's
when
wonderful.
they, you know, ate their first solid or walked, or,
of course,
you know, I got to experience that. And to me, parenting is so important too.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to do it right.
For sure.
I feel so grateful that I was able to kind of balance that with working part-time while my husband watched the kids.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, to get the education and the career and be able to be the mom I wanted to be.
That's great. That's great. And it sounds like, even though, you know, I'm sure it was challenging and stretched you thin at times, it sounds like all of that you were able to do was born out of your own personal value system. Like you said, being a mom, what it means to show up as a mom. None of what you were doing seemed to pull from that. And I think that that's amazing.
Yeah.
So in other words, like being able to, like you said, watch your kiddos, both of them, you know, take their first milestone or reach their first milestones.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's something that's important to you versus, oh no, because I was here doing that or off doing that, I missed those moments.
Right.
So I'm not having regrets. You know, I think that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel vindicated because both children, my son is 30 and my daughter just turned 26.
My gosh.
And they're happy, successful,
Wow.
good human beings.
Amazing.
So
Love it.
right.
Good job, Mom.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing. I love it. I love it. Okay, so post licensure,
Mm-hmm.
what was life like at that point?
Okay, let me
Yeah.
think back. So, I think as part of those 3,000 hours, what really affected me was 500 of those hours had to be working with either children or families.
Okay.
Right. And so I found a internship at Cedars-Sinai Hospital
Yes.
in their preschool for developmentally disabled kids.
Yes.
And it's called Cheerful Helpers.
Oh, nice. Is it still a thing today?
Yes, Cheerful Helpers
Love
still
it.
exists.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's on the
Yeah.
west side.
Well,
So
yep.
that again, I did not think I wanted to work with children.
Oh.
And after having that experience, I realized I loved it. So that was really opened up a lot of doors for me to work with. These were children between the ages of 3 and 8 who had a variety of developmental issues. Some had seizure disorders. If they were autistic, they had to be high functioning autistic.
Right.
A lot of physical delays, processing, emotional delays. So it was a lot of different, each child was unique in their issues and how to work with them. So as part of the classroom, we would work one-on-one with the students.
Okay.
And then I also started a social skills group.
That's right. You shared that with me.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
With them with the older kids in the afternoons.
Okay.
Which again was really valuable, I think, for them to learn how to get along with others and how to feel to be a part of the world.
Absolutely. When you say the older kids, what age group was that?
Yeah, well, they were about 6 to 8.
6 to 8. Okay.
Yeah.
And was the social skills group something that you initiated? Were you approached about starting that? Or
It had just started off with the younger kids.
Okay.
There was a younger group, intervention group, and so another intern and I were asked to begin the social skills group for the relatively older kids in the classroom.
Very nice. And I remember when we chatted about that, you said that one of the primary purposes of your role there was to work with the kids with the hopes of supporting their transition into more of a mainstream setting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the goal and the hope that most of them, if not all of them, would be able to transition to mainstream.
Yeah. Was that typically the outcome? Was it a mixed bag of events, or?
I would say mixed.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. And then I recall us talking a little bit about therapist-assisted horse therapy.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
That was another great experience that kind of grew out of Cheerful Helpers.
Love it.
One of the students I worked with, she had mainly a seizure disorder, but I worked with her for about 1.5 years, and we got really close. So her family decided to buy a horse ranch, a little one, for children, so that their daughter, their idea was that was a place that she could work for the rest of her life. So as part of that ranch, they wanted to do therapist-assisted or horse-assisted therapy with the young children too, and they invited me to be the therapist at the children's ranch.
Great.
All right. So I did work there for several years and developed a social skills program there.
Nice.
And also the children would care for the horses,
Yeah.
and I would too.
Nice.
So we would
Yeah.
brush the horses, saddle them up, clean up their poop, all that.
All of it.
And
Yeah.
the children really were able to grow and develop personally,
love it.
and it helped them to relate to other children and to the animals.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I'm curious about if you reflect back, what were maybe a couple of clinical implications, and what were some of the, or one or two of the clinical outcomes that you were able to observe?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of one client in particular who had a lot of more physical problems, and also she had a lot of behavioral issues too. And I remember every time she would get on the horse, and we would have to, strap her onto the horse, and we would start walking, and I would walk beside her, and I could just feel her body relax.
Release, yeah.
I could just feel the anxiety
Nice.
drain out of her body.
That's nice.
Yeah, and so as she was on the horse, that's when we were able to, have conversations and do some therapy for me to find out what actually was making her anxious.
Absolutely. What was happening in her internal world.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. And so I noticed that with a lot of the kids, that
Okay.
being on the horse just brought a calmness, and it brought them to this place where they were able to be open and vulnerable,
It's amazing.
right,
Yeah.
to some interventions.
For sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. Almost projective in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the social skills group, so, obviously only a couple kids could ride the
Right.
horses at a time.
Right.
And in the meantime, the other children would be taking care of the chickens and, cleaning the ranch. And
Love it.
so it taught them a lot of life skills.
For sure.
Mhm.
Life skills, a work ethic,
Yes.
commitment, dedication, and then, again, those clinical or therapeutic benefits
Right.
attached to as well. It's like the bonus.
Yes.
How
Right.
nice.
Unfortunately, in 2008, when the Great Recession hit, that was it hit the ranch pretty hard because we weren't being covered by insurance. Regional Center covered some for the children, but not the therapeutic part.
Right.
So, unfortunately, my piece at the children's ranch ended at that
Okay.
point.
Shoot.
But the ranch is still there.
Still there.
Uh-huh.
Was your piece being covered by like private funding or private dollars?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then the recession, and then okay.
Right.
Got it. But again, wonderful. So how long were you there, like chronologically? How long were you
I
there?
think about 3 years.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice chunk of time.
And it was interesting because again I melded my personal life.
yeah.
The owners of the children's ranch were very open to having my kids come
I was going to
over.
ask you that.
Right.
Oh.
And I remember I was my daughter's Girl Scout leader.
Oh,
And they earned their bronze award
very
by
nice.
doing some work and having a carnival
Oh,
at the children's
how
ranch.
lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of nice overlap.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Mhm.
Very fortunate. Okay. All right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Talk to us about what eventually brought you to Soul Tenders, private
Okay.
practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So, I had gotten the work with children. Also, as part of that, some of my intern hours, I worked with my supervisor at a private practice in
Okay.
South Pasadena.
Great.
So that's when I kind of started my own boutique practice.
Uh-huh.
So I never had more than 10 clients
Okay.
or so.
Okay.
But I ran that as I was working at my husband's business
Wow.
too. So I put kind of a patchwork of
Love it.
of jobs together,
Right.
which I loved
Yeah.
because it gave me a lot of variation.
Mhm.
But eventually, I decided I did not want to work with children anymore because I was too old to be crawling on the floor with them. So I kind of backed off on working with kids.
Okay.
So my private practice was all adults.
Okay.
And as the years went by, I realized that I needed to or needed and wanted to build the practice.
Sure.
And I was realizing that in order to do that, I was going to have to start some kind of marketing plan, or, I was at the point where I had to put in a lot more effort to build it again.
Sure.
And that seemed really daunting
Yeah.
to me at the time.
Yeah.
So I feel so fortunate that in 2017 I happened to find Soul Tenders, and at that point it was a brand new business model for Wendy, and it answered everything I wanted because Soul Tenders provides all the marketing. They provide the leads for us, the clients, and we have a choice on the clients that we do or don't want to take. They did all the insurance paperwork, and so I just found that that was exactly what I needed at that point. So I began with Soul Tenders in this Arcadia office back in 2017.
Wonderful.
So it's been 7 years. 7.5 years.
That's great. Yeah. That's what a wonderful journey. And do you embrace your identity as not only a private practitioner, but as a business owner? Has that clicked for you?
Actually, I when I was in my private practice, that's when I was trying to be a business owner.
She's like, I was working towards that.
I was doing it, but it didn't come naturally, and it wasn't something that I really enjoyed. So for me, Soul Tenders is more that, okay, yes, you will handle that for me so that I can focus on the actual clinical work.
Absolutely. Yeah, and which is something that you 100% have total control over, and it's yours. It's yours to cultivate.
Exactly. And I guess that is one thing that I've known about myself all along is, and because I started in sales, right? I've always been my own boss. I've always scheduled my own time. And that's something that's very important to me, and to have time flexibility.
Absolutely.
And that's what Soul Tenders offered to me while they were helping me with the parts of the business that I didn't want to do.
Absolutely. The administrative, all of the credentialing, and you got it. You got it. Okay. And I think that's what helps us thrive as clinicians, when we know, what our roles are, and we're able to really stay in our lane and be selective with not only clientele, but, things that we want to get involved in, whether it's group consultation, whether it's taking on something else, on the side. It's just, there's just something to be said about just really crafting your own journey. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's one thing I think is wonderful about Soul Tenders too, because there are so many more options. I keep saying, well, if I were 20 years younger, but to write your own continuing education program,
that's wonderful.
And all the different opportunities that Soul Tenders offers. Right now, I'm at a place where I'm not wanting to take on a lot more.
Right.
But it's like, wow.
The option's always there.
The options are there, which are great.
That's wonderful. Okay. So I know that we chatted a little bit about the fact that you see individuals and couples in your practice. And you mentioned something called reparenting that you do with a lot of your clients. I think you said mostly young women.
Yes.
But I'd love for you to flush that out a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I guess that my interest in parenting really happened not with my own children, but also working back at Cheerful Helpers at Cedars-Sinai.
Okay.
And because we had to break everything down into such small pieces in order to present to the kids, I felt that I really got a good understanding of positive parenting and positive reinforcement, right?
Definitely.
And so it's something that's kind of developed in my practice naturally, that I've had some clients, young adults who got really bad parenting, and it has caused a lot of different issues for them. For some clients, it was maybe physical trauma or neglect. One client in particular I'm thinking of grew up in a foster home, in the foster system, which was really traumatic for her.
Sure.
So it's kind of developed that I realized I go back with these clients and say, let's rewrite your narrative.
Yeah.
And we go back to the beginning, and I start with basic attachment again and mirroring.
Absolutely.
Right? And go back to those very fundamentals that most parents do with an infant.
Sure.
And I go with my clients step by step through that whole process. And of course, as an adult, you can get through that parenting a lot quicker.
Right.
But the concept is the same, is, to go back to build trust in the world, to build trust in yourself, and to build your self-esteem.
That's lovely. Wow. And how would you say, how successful, for lack of a better way of putting it, would you say those outcomes have been?
I've seen so much success
that's nice.
with these clients, and it is long-term work.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Sure.
But I have seen, so many young people and some ones who are older too that have just started blossoming because they got the parenting the right way this time.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
And I can only imagine the positive impact that it potentially has on, so many things, but, clients feeling empowered, finding their voice for the first time or rediscovering their voice, being able to exert control, perceived or actual, over their journey. Again, there's that word. And that just, again, the fundamentals that, ideally would have been, I guess, crafted way back when.
Right.
But unfortunately, those things weren't. But again, here's the reparenting concept.
Right.
I can still do this. I can still make this happen for myself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
I love it.
You're right. The biggest word is empowerment. Right. That I've seen that they've learned to trust their own judgment and trust themselves, that they can make good choices.
Absolutely.
For themselves.
For sure. Well, if they can trust themselves, then they can, to your point, extend that trust to the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Very, very nice, Candace. I love it. There's another specialty area that you have. It's working with clients and couples who are navigating the fertility process.
Yes.
What can you share?
Right. Yeah, and that started way back when I worked in South Pasadena, back in the 90s still. Through networking, I got introduced to several of the doctors at Huntington Reproductive Center in Pasadena and worked with them. I didn't do the screening part where, a therapist does a psychological assessment to see if someone has the stability to go through the process. I did not do that piece.
Okay.
What I decided to specialize in was helping individuals and couples through the process of fertility, which, as you know, can last for years.
Yeah.
Right, and it is a roller coaster ride, and so I started that niche back then, and it's grown throughout these years.
Wow.
So, and this year alone, I'm going to have 3 babies this
Oh
year.
my goodness! Congratulations.
One client, we're waiting any day now. She'll have her baby, and so that's kind of how I call them my family.
Of course, absolutely.
So yeah, it was a good year this year.
That's wonderful.
We'll have 3 babies.
That's
in
great.
the practice this year.
That's wonderful. And what would you say are the intrinsic values that you hold that contribute to you being so successful in creating this niche?
Okay. I guess that what I realized is what happens to most couples is there comes a point where they are no longer working as a team if you're not careful, right?
Right.
That there will come a time when, there's a split
Yeah.
over some issue or another.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is allowed to continue, it can really break up a marriage.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which does happen frequently, you
Yeah.
know. So that's where I have found that the biggest work is to keep the individuals seeing each other as their partner and working together through whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, for sure.
In the process.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Well, that's where those counseling skills come into play. You know, knowing how to guide and help people navigate that process.
Exactly.
Because, you know, conflict is natural and it's to be expected. It can also show up as a distractor. But that's the thing, you know, I think you have an obvious gift to be able to help people find their way back. You know, people deviate, you know, all the time. But again, it's like I think there's a difference between being temporarily distracted versus being permanently disconnected.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're also EMDR trained and certified.
Yes.
So how does EMDR
Yes.
work with your practice?
I know that I have talked before about my introduction to EMDR, which was way back in the early 90s when I was at Pepperdine.
Oh, wow.
And the EMDR began in the early 90s up in Northern California. And I remember at Pepperdine, you know, the professors kind of scoffing at this wacky.
Like, what is this?
Yeah, this wacky therapy where you wave your hand and magic
Tapping
happens.
and what? Yeah.
So, you know, I guess that was my first introduction to it. So it took me a while to actually say, all right, well, let me look at this. Seems like there might be something to it. So I got trained about 5 years ago, I guess, in EMDR, and it in a way it does seem a little magical.
Now that I think about it,
yeah. But no, it has profound benefits to clients that I have seen. You know, I use it as part of therapy, as one of the tools or techniques that I use in certain individuals' therapy. I don't do it across the board. I know some therapists only do
strictly
EMDR.
Right.
But for me, it's an adjunct to other therapy for clients who have something that they're stuck on, you know, some trauma in their past that they're stuck on. And so it has been very valuable to use to process those old traumas and to see how people actually do. You can see them calm down and they talk about feeling lighter. And feeling relief.
Yeah, wonderful.
And so it's been very valuable. And then, you know, once you deal with that trauma, then you can, you know, make progress moving forward. And growth.
Right. So one foot before the other.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, really nice clinical outcomes. Great. Okay. Is there anything else? I came up with this term, a professional bucket list. Is there anything else? Is there anything else on your professional bucket list?
Well, yes, I am going to write a book or two.
Ooh, I love it.
I am in the process of, and it's interesting. I kind of asked a couple clients along the way. It's like, you know, if I were to write a book, what topics would you think would be helpful, or what have you found helpful of the work that we've done? So I have, you know, asked a couple clients, and it's interesting. I think that the most valuable information that I've come up with is communication skills.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
And so that's I'm, you know, I have the book lined out, and I am working on a book to work on basic communication skills and communication skills for couples.
Wonderful.
And, you know, because also in the fertility process,
you
know, you have to be really honest, but kind in your communication
for sure.
too. Right.
For
so that's the first book.
Okay.
I love it. Going to write.
Oh, it's going to be wonderful. Excellent. Well, what do you enjoy when you're not working? I know you love
Ah.
football. We talked about fantasy football a little earlier before we got on camera, and I was like, "Wait, tell me about this and what does that entail?" So yeah, how do you spend quality time? I know you love family, and how do you decompress? What does all of that
Right,
look like?
right. Well, again, as a Pittsburgher,
Mm-hmm.
I have been a
Yep.
Steelers fan my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the things that my kids and I do together is watch the Steeler games.
Love
My
it.
husband watches too, but he just, makes cracks about us. He won't root for the Steelers, but we really enjoy watching the Steeler games, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of branched out into different football teams too.
Okay.
So right this year is the first year that I'm doing a fantasy football team.
Very cool.
My son invited me to join his league.
Very cool. I love it.
And so far, I'm in third place in my league,
Very good.
so I'm doing
You're
pretty
doing
well with
well.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So there's that piece.
Okay.
The other big thing is I love to travel, and
Mm.
that's what I'm really looking for.
Nice.
That's a lot of my bucket list is
Okay.
travel.
Okay.
So I had promised myself in my 20s that I wanted to visit or touch down, put my feet on every continent except maybe
Ooh.
Antarctica.
Okay.
So
Okay. Yep. Yep.
and so
Mhm.
far I've gone everywhere. The only place left is Asia
Oh,
and Australia.
nice.
Sorry,
Ooh.
Asia and Australia.
Okay.
Right.
All
So
right.
that's the next trip I hope is to Japan in the next couple years.
Oh, love that.
Probably the best time of my life was last summer. My husband, son, and daughter and I went to a safari in Tanzania
Oh,
in Africa.
wow.
And I said, this has been the happiest 3 weeks of my life.
Sounds amazing.
It was so wonderful. And again, I love being in nature.
Nature. Yeah.
And, as an aside, when I was 8 years old, that's when I said I wanted to go to Tanzania. Actually, Kenya.
Really?
Right, because of the movie Born Free.
Yep.
So that's when I had said back when I was 8 that I was going to go there
Wow.
to the Serengeti.
Wow.
And so it was a wonderful trip.
You
And I'm
definitely.
looking forward to doing some more traveling.
Of course, continue to manifest all those
Yes.
personal goals and aspirations.
Exactly.
That's what it's about.
Exactly.
I love that for you and your family. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And then on a daily or weekly basis, I like to do crafting, and I'm always telling my clients to try something new.
Sure.
And try some new activity.
Yeah.
And so the last year I started taking watercolor painting classes.
Ooh.
So
Okay.
I'm really getting not good, but I'm getting better.
Hey, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Right.
What a nice outlet. What does it do for you intrinsically? What is it?
That's interesting. I guess it makes me, it uses that creative part of myself.
Yeah.
And, I guess I was always intimidated because, as I said, my brother's an artist.
Right.
And my
He's
father was.
standard.
Yes,
Yeah.
and my father was also a very good artist. So I was always intimidated.
Yep. You told me, I think I'm recalling this correctly. You said if my brother even halfway said, "Oh, that's pretty good," you're like, "I took it. I took it. It was like golden."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And so I finally got a couple watercolors painted, and I sent him a picture of them.
Okay.
And it was high praise. He said, not bad.
Okay. I love it. That's golden.
I'm feeling like
Yes.
I'm on my way to something.
Very good.
But it was something I always wanted to do, but always felt like, well, I'm not very good at it. And now I decided it doesn't matter.
No barrier.
Right. So I can kind of lose myself
Great.
during that time when I'm painting. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's great. Yeah, no. Yeah, and you living that, you're definitely modeling for your clients, and maybe they'll, take a leap as well, a little bit of a leap of faith.
Right.
Wow, I love it. What a well-rounded life. Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, good. That's what that's one of the benefits of being older, I guess,
Mhm.
and I'm realizing that now is that now I do have a little bit more time
Yeah.
to put all those things together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Well, it has been such a pleasure sharing some time and space with you this morning. I appreciate your time and you being here.
It's been
And
wonderful. Thank you, Carmen.
wonderful. Absolutely. Well, again, everyone, this is my wonderful colleague, Candace Colliflower. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist within our Soul Tenders network. So if any of our viewers want to reach out to you to ask questions, or a lot of times prospective clients find us by way of this podcast, what is your Soul Tenders email?
Okay. My email is Candace, Candace, .ic@soultenders.com.
Wonderful. And as always, if anyone has questions for me, I can be reached at cmajid.ip@soultenders.com. That's cmajid.ip@soultenders.com. And for anyone who's interested or curious about Provider Spotlight or the Conversations with Carmen podcasts, you can reach out to Provider Relations at providerrelations@soultenders.com. Again, thank you very much, Candace. It was lovely meeting with you. Thank you for your time, and we will catch you next time. Thank you for joining.